Hey everyone, and welcome to our first AMA with Lindsay Frey. I'm Alex Ellison. I'll be asking Lindsay all the questions that you guys have submitted over the last couple of weeks. For context, Lindsay has not seen or heard any of these questions before, so you're going to get real, authentic, off-the-cuff responses. So without further ado, we can jump right into it. Thanks for hopping on, Lindsay. Are you excited to get started?
Let's do it.
All right. So first question, and I'm just sort of going to go through these in the order they were submitted. So there's not really a rhyme or reason beyond that. There might not have a lot of flow, but feel free to take the questions in whichever direction you sort of feel like the answer is going. Don't feel too constricted or anything. So first question, if you could give one huge piece of advice to a brand new SDR, just one piece of advice, what would it be?
I guess it would be because I think as an SDR, it's easy to fall into a rut, right? And just kind of go through the motions. And I think with all of the tools at SDR's fingertips, it's easy to kind of become robotic in the job. And as being an SDR, it's tough. You're talking to a lot of people, hopefully you're making a lot of calls, it can get redundant. So I think my biggest piece of advice would be to kind of keep it fresh, to approach sales development almost as an investigation and as kind of uncovering facts and information that's leading you closer to sort of your overall objective. And then I think making sure you personalize your messaging and switching things up if things aren't working. So the worst thing to do is just continue to go through the motions and not see success and continue to just do the same thing over and over again. So my piece of advice would just be to, when you find yourself kind of in a trance and walking through the role and picking up the phone and kind of doing the same activities and not seeing results, then I would say just make sure that you're personalizing, make sure that you are being relevant, make sure that you're thinking creatively about how you're approaching prospects, and think about sort of what the objective is of each of your calls, right? The last thing you want to do is try to call a prospect and they actually answer, and then you're not prepared for that conversation, because you're just sort of sleepwalking through the role. So I would say just understand what your objective is for each call, what you want to get out of each call, and be prepared for somebody to actually answer the phone.
There you go. I love it. There's a lot of good advice wrapped up into one piece of advice in a way.
Yeah, sorry, it's hard for me to say just one thing, but I think I got to it.
A little bit of extra advice. I don't think anyone's going to blame you for that. Cool. So the next question is a little more demandDrive specific and sort of the nature of our business as a sales development services firm. How could a company like demandDrive support the business case to leadership to outsource the SDR team at perhaps maybe a prospect you're speaking with, or somebody that maybe they're a champion within their organization for outsourcing, but the rest of their team maybe is kind of hesitant about this kind of strategy?
Okay, so how to kind of overcome the skeptics within an organization where maybe there are some folks that are interested in exploring it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of use cases as to why an organization would want to consider outsourcing this function. I think the first one that I see is, I'll talk to companies who are considering building their first SDR team, and they really don't have somebody to manage the team effectively. And they're thinking of just bringing on one or two people, and they'll just roll up to the VP of sales or the VP of marketing. And in those situations, I think it's almost always better to outsource a program. You're outsourcing it to a team of specialists who know how to do this, who have the infrastructure to manage and build the program on your behalf. And you have access to, in our case, 150 or so SDRs that are all kind of working together. So, you're not just a team of one or two, you have all of that training and sort of management and oversight built in. So I think that's the first piece. I think we help by outsourcing to a firm like demandDrive, we mitigate a lot of risk, as if you were to hire folks internally and then you mishire and that person leaves, you are now taking 10 steps back. You have to open a rec, hire for that position again. Whereas, we mitigate that risk if for some reason we do have turnover on our team, and we're able to reassign somebody within a matter of days or a week to get someone backfilled. So I think that's a huge benefit. And I think the speed in which we're able to launch programs and our speed to production tends to be a lot faster than for organizations who are looking to build this from the ground up. Those would probably be the things I'd point to for someone who's maybe trying to overcome skepticism within their company.
Absolutely. And then the next question is somewhat related in the sense that it's about sales development firms, because the industry today, can sort of either charge a retainer model, a cost per lead model, or some sort of hybrid. So somebody wants to know which of those three kind of layouts is best and why, and then does it take into account any aspects of the client's business to make that decision?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think it kind of depends on what your objective is. And it does depend, I think, on the business as well. So, there's firms that are offering kind of a pay per lead model. You may not necessarily know or have a dedicated team that's working on your account. It may be a few different people that kind of work on a couple of different projects. You may not have the integration into your internal tech stack, but if you need, high volume, I would say if you're selling a more transactional type of product, sort of a lower price point, higher volumes, that can work. I think that pay per lead model can work. I think a retainer model, typically that's going to align with firms that are dedicating fully kind of full-time equivalent reps to their account. I think in our case, right, we're going to be able to work within the client's tech stack. The SDRs are going to be able to represent themselves as being with the client on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of, transparency, visibility to the client, an extension of your team. So I think for organizations where it's a more complex sale, that you really want to know who's taking your message out to the market, and you sort of like the idea of outsourcing and you recognize the benefits of that, but you also want to know who your team is and make them feel like they're part of the team, then I think that retainer model is probably a better fit. As far as the hybrid model, I think that can work well. My recommendation when I speak to prospects who are interested in the hybrid model is that it takes a little bit of time to find out what your goal should be. So I usually recommend taking 90 days to determine, what one SDR is going to be able to produce as far as volume. And then you can set sort of a goal around, okay, each lead should be worth X amount. And if we hit that number, then we would, the sales development firm would be where they want to be and the client would be where they want to be. But because each program and each client is so different as far as the degree of difficulty in getting a qualified lead, the definition of a qualified lead, it can really vary, and you need a couple of months to determine what that measure of success as far as lead volume should be.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And it's definitely, we hear this a lot in sales.
Oh, yeah.
But so case by case.
It's probably the most common question I get.
Yeah. So I guess you have to know what you're looking for. Would you say that about the client?
Yeah, you need to know what you're looking for. Exactly. And you need to know what your objective is, right? So I think if it's a project-based program where, I need somebody to book appointments, they don't need to be the most qualified appointments, and I just need someone to do this for 3 months, or I need 15 appointments, then the pay per lead option may be the best one. If you're looking for a long-term partner that you want someone to kind of build and manage a scalable program, then probably the retainer model is the better option.
Right. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Moving into more, I think SDR specific questions. We definitely had a handful of SDRs submit questions related to the role specifically. What's the best advice you can give to someone aiming to transition from the SDR role to an AE role?
So I think, first of all, there's so many skills that you acquire as an SDR that then align and will transfer over to an AE. So I think one of the things that I'll have clients talk to me about is, they love account executives who still prospect on their own, who don't lose that kind of hustle and ability to pick up the phone themselves. So I think if you've been an SDR, sort of hold on to that mentality and don't rely on leads coming in and leads from your SD, the new SDRs that are going to be passing leads to you. So I think keep some of that hustle and keep some of the that ability to prospect on your own. I think probably the biggest thing that SDRs moving into AEs have to navigate is just sort of what happens in a deal down the funnel, right? So where a win for an SDR is qualifying a lead, booking a meeting, and then to a lesser extent, seeing sort of how that progresses through to an opportunity. But they can lose sight of obviously the negotiation tactics, putting together all of the paperwork, negotiating what happens when there's other competitors in the deal. So that's kind of what they're going to have to work on, because now a win isn't just booking a meeting, a win is going to be closing business. So just focusing on acquiring those skills around negotiation and closing business.
Yeah, it makes sense because there's a lot of overlap. Obviously, it's
for sure. Yeah, I think if you keep the SDR mindset and you apply that to the AE role, you'll have a lot of success, right? Because in my opinion, that's the hardest part of sales is sort of actually connecting with someone who, especially on a cold outreach, or someone who maybe came through a marketing channel but wasn't necessarily going to take further steps within the sales process, but being able to convert them and get them excited and interested in the product, service, or solution you're providing is really hard. And that takes a special skill set. So I think that if you can kind of keep true to that and kind of keep that mentality as you move into an AE role, it'll serve you well.
Yeah, I love that. The next question, I lied a little bit earlier. I put this one question next to the other one because it's pretty similar, but when it comes to other future career goals, you alluded to it a little bit, moving into maybe marketing or customer success, really any other different avenues. The question specifically, how can the SDR role benefit my future career goals? And it leaves it kind of open-ended, but I'm interested to see what you think. What parts of the SDR role I think maybe are most applicable to other industries or maybe moving your career in a different direction than an account exec?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this a lot because I feel like the SDR role, you can take the skills that you acquire in this role and leverage them to sort of so many different avenues. And I've seen that just through what, the SDRs that have moved on from demandDrive, what they've been able to do and accomplish. Both at demandDrive, at our clients or elsewhere. And I think, sort of there's a couple natural paths, certainly the one you mentioned previously, moving into an account executive role. I think being an SDR is a perfect launch pad to that. I think moving into marketing is great as well. As you know, Alex, you did this yourself. I think what I've seen is marketing teams love hiring people that have sales experience. I think it's a lot easier to move from sales to marketing versus marketing to sales is what I've seen. I think another natural path is, sales management, SDR management. Sorry if you're going to hear my 3-year-old crying in the background, but so you're going to see a lot of, you're going to see natural progression to sort of SDR management, sales management, and moving forward on that path. I think client success is another sort of natural path and avenue that SDRs sometimes will take. You might find that you really prefer kind of the account management side of this or working with active clients versus sort of the hunting side of it. So those are the ones I see most often. And I think just the ability to pick up the phone and talk to people that you don't know and create enthusiasm around a product or service for someone else, that's a great skill no matter what you end up doing. But I think those are probably the most natural paths that I see.
Yeah, 100%. Sweet. So moving into the next question, we're really diving into the details of the SDR role here. What is your favorite objection handling technique or strategy?
I mean, I think for SDRs, staying away. I think like, to take a step back, and I'm not avoiding the question, I can give you like a tactical one, but I think that remembering as an SDR, your job is not to close a deal. Your job is really just to connect somebody who might be interested in a product or service or has a problem that your product can solve, and connecting them with someone who can help them explore that further. So I think if you kind of take a step back and look at it through that lens, that you're really almost a consultant. You're seeing if there's this prospect, this account has a problem or a challenge that you know you've solved for other people. And if so, connecting them to the right person who can help them explore that. If that's the case, then I think like you can kind of look at objection handling from a different lens, right? So if you get the objection of like, we don't have budget for it. I mean, unless our client really wants to specifically qualify on a budget number, but I see that to be the case less and less, as long as it's the right account, the right prospect, and they have the right use case. Then it's like, hey, that is all right. I'm just you're sort of brokering an introduction between interested parties. So I think if you look at it like that, then, you can kind of look at any objection through that lens. And then also understanding, like, if you're talking to a prospect that truly does not have the right need or use case, it's also okay to walk away. And I think sometimes like SDRs early in their career, like I have someone on the phone, I need to make them a lead. But it's also okay to disqualify someone. And if they put up an objection that's a viable objection, and then it's okay to say, hey, yeah, you know what, you're right. You may not have the right need or right fit for this, but hey, let's stay in touch. And if it ever does kind of bubble up, let's connect. That's also okay. So I don't know if that didn't really answer your question specifically, but I guess like maybe think of it through that lens when you're coming up on objections. And that might help.
Absolutely. And I think that last point you said really spoke to, my time as an SDR, but if they have it's understanding the difference between an objection because they just don't want to talk to you, and an objection because there really is something in the way of this becoming an actual opportunity, conversation, deal down the line. So being able to listen to that, right, and understanding when this just becomes pipeline down the road and you're just basically disqualifying them, and knowing that that's okay.
Yeah, and you move on to the next one. I mean, there's going to be some people that just don't want to talk to you, and like you're going to have to navigate that. I mean, if they're and if they're just going to hang out, they're going to be that type of prospect. But if it's someone and they just, they're shutting you down, or like before you even really are able to articulate what it is that you're looking to accomplish, then you need to kind of work on your opening. You need to work on your relevancy. You need to maybe work on your messaging in general, just to get a stronger opening. If you're getting shut down that early on, or maybe you're not focused on the right person, maybe you need to target somebody different. Those are some things I think about if you're getting shut down really early.
Yeah, see, you got tactical, you're good.
Sure. I mean, I have to like brush off my SDR kind of 101 hat, but okay, doing my best.
Yeah, you're doing great. All right, so a little more high level question coming up next. Where do you see the future of sales development going from here?
Oh gosh. Okay. Objection handling, future of sales development. So I think the last year and a half has really been interesting, right? Because I think it's kind of almost sped up the need and the need for SDRs. I think with everyone going through the pandemic, there's obviously been an emphasis on pulling more people to an inside sales model. I think more the spotlight has been on, the importance of SDRs and inside sales reps, and less on these kind of what we've seen historically be these field sales account executives who are going out and meeting with clients. I mean, we just weren't able to do it. And so we had to pivot a little bit. So what I've seen is that sales development has become an even more important function. I've seen companies where historically, you look at one SDR supporting one or two AEs, maybe three in some cases, to now actually two SDRs supporting one AE. and sort of using the higher cost salespeople, like arming them just with more meetings and doubling down on the SDR team. And I think, and I see that just with how many open job positions there are for SDRs, and obviously the explosion of tech. And I'm obviously looking at through the lens of, B2B tech SDRs. But I mean, the explosion of tech over the last few years, and that continued growth will make this even more important. And I think people just being remote and inside anyway, I think will lend itself to you're seeing more and more SDR teams, larger SDR teams, more of a focus on that department overall. So I certainly, don't see it going anywhere.
Yeah. Do you see I guess the question is more just about remote versus not. Do you see like this now, like fully remote and then continue to probably be hybrid environment affecting sales development in one way or another?
I mean, I think it will, it's so I can't make predictions anymore because I feel like none of us can.
They've all been wrong so far. So,
but no. I think hybrid's here to stay. I think it's going to be, in my opinion, it would be tough to bring. I mean, I'm looking at it through the lens of our own SDRs. Like, I think it would be tough to be like, okay, now we are mandating that you come back 5 days a week. I think the majority of businesses, where it's possible, right? There's some, obviously businesses can't operate that way, but where it's possible, where we're lucky enough to have the tools and technology at our fingertips that allow us to work remotely. And that obviously saved us a lot through this pandemic. I think you're going to be hard pressed to bring people back full time. But I think that people do want to come back in some capacity. I think that blend is going to be really valuable because I think it's so important, as we've seen, right? Alex, you've been in the office through the summer, and I think it's really valuable having that sort of human in-person connection with your peers, especially in this role where, SDRs tend to be early in their career and they need that support and guidance and just listening up to other colleagues. So I think that's important, but then also giving people the flexibility to work from home as well. I talk to a lot of reps and they're like, actually I'm more productive at home, but I love coming into the office because I need the interaction with my peers. So that's my prediction. But again, I'm not a psychic. And so we'll see. It's kind of a little bit of like recency bias. So maybe in 5 years, it'll be, I'll be saying something different. But right now, I think the hybrid model is where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. The next question is, you sort of touched on the answer to this with the first question, but specifically about SDR burnout. It's unfortunately a relatively common thing within the industry. Do you have any, aside from you talked about sort of changing up your cadence and experimenting with things as a way to avoid that, do you have any other strategies to sort of avoid or alleviate a rep who's just kind of like burnt out?
So I think the first thing is really to ask yourself what you want to get out of this role. So I tend to think, and there's certainly outliers, but individuals are in the SDR role for a year or two, sometimes a little longer, right? The pandemic sort of shifted things, but they're in the role for a year or two before they're experiencing that kind of like, okay, I'm ready for the next sort of challenge. So I think you have to always ask yourself, what am I getting out? What am I learning from this that's going to help to leverage, what can I leverage to get to kind of where I want to be in a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So if you have a clear goal and a clear path, then I think that you'll experience less burnout because you have an objective that you're working towards. So that's the first piece. And I think that going back to what I said earlier, sort of approaching this as a little bit like an investigation in a game. That's what I would do when I was an SDR, and it made it a lot more fun. Like, it was fun to kind of hunt down the right person. It felt good when I got a connection. Obviously, it felt great when I got a lead, and I looked at it as a puzzle, and that made it just more enjoyable just from a day-to-day work perspective. And then I think, right, when in any career, one of the things you want is to constantly be growing and learning. So I think if, asking yourself, like, are there still things for me to learn from peers, from my manager, from trainers, from clients, from, SDRs at other organizations? If there's still things to learn, then I think there's still time that you should put into the role. But again, if you've hit that kind of 2-year mark and, you feel like you've kind of started to plateau, maybe it's time to sort of look at what the next challenge is.
Yeah, I totally hear that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we've got time for, I think, 2 more questions. It's going to get a little bit personal, so I hope that's okay. The first one is,
didn't want to show me the questions beforehand?
I've got my reasons.
Okay.
So the first one is, talk to me a little bit about your sales development background and what it was like for you when you were an SDR compared to maybe what an SDR goes through today.
Wow. So that was a long time ago. I will not tell you how long ago, but it was a long time ago. So yeah, I mean, right out of college, I was an SDR at a tech company. We were selling HR technology, so applicant tracking, and resume management solutions, which are still a thing today, but it was way back when. So the technology was a little bit different. I think just the lack of, obviously we had email, we had a CRM, but there weren't all of these sales enablement tools. So I think the job is a lot more efficient now. There's a lot more automation. I think that's mostly a good thing. I think it can lend itself to, SDRs becoming a bit robotic and sort of falling into a rut a little bit easier. But I mean, man, there's you're able to email a lot more people a lot faster. You're able to make calls a lot more efficiently. There's a lot more data resources at your fingertips. There were 2 data providers, and now there's tons. I mean, there's just access to more, right? Access to more tech, access to more data. Things are more efficient. Things are more optimized. What else? Was there another part of the question, or is that how is it different?
Just what it was like when you were an SDR, if you have any other.
But you know what? In a lot of ways, it was the exact same. It's I think it would be what I loved about being an SDR at a tech company was just, the team was competitive, but supportive. It tended to be people around my own age. It was, I don't know, they became good friends. I think we were all kind of in it together. There was a lot of excitement. I think being in tech, it's cutting edge. So I think a lot of the things that I saw and sort of the camaraderie and what that brings is actually very similar to today. And a lot of it goes back to just be a human. You're talking to other humans, trying to solve a problem, and that hasn't changed. So the biggest thing has changed. It's just easier for you to do more of that with the technology and the tools.
Yeah. All right. Last question.
Okay.
What is your best story from when you were an SDR?
Okay, I've got it. This is an easy one. It's the first time I ever made a call. I tell this story to when I used to do training. I have a lot, but okay, I'll just go with this one because it was the one that came into my mind. So I was an SDR at this tech company. There were 3 people that started with me in the training class, and we all had a team lead. And we went through, I don't know, I can't remember, a week or 2 of training, and you do some role plays, and you learn the product and all of that common stuff. And so now it was time, and we all sat in queues. So now I feel like that's one difference. It's much more, we sit in more open concept environments. Whereas my first job as an SDR, we had high queue walls, and we're all in these queues. Yep. And that morning is okay, you're going to make your first calls. Your team lead's going to sit in on your first calls. And all week we were listening in on other people. And as you know, right, Alex, you don't get a ton of people on the phone. It's tough, right. You're not every call is. And so I thought, okay, well, all my calls are going to be, voicemails. I can leave voicemails and I thought okay, I've done the role plays. They're take a couple hours, get your talk tracks prepared, get ready. So I'm setting up my cube, with my little scripts and getting all ready. And I'm okay. So my team lead, Chris, comes over And he's like, all right, and they have like, we had like old school technology where you literally had like a splitter on a headset. And you don't know about this old school technology, Alex, but like he'd sit next to me and he's like, has a splitter on the headset so he can hear the call. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to get voicemails and I'm going to leave messages. And the first call I got was a live person. And they were like, hey, this is Brian. And I just hung up the phone, just hung right up on that person and did not say a word. And I did not expect to do that. I just got so nervous and completely hung up on this poor guy. But I shook it off. So I guess like the story there was, I think like it is okay to make mistakes and everybody will. It's okay to completely mess up a call. It's okay to hang up a prospect, on a prospect. So, but that was a funny one where I literally just, I just hung up on the first person that I called. My team lead was like, okay, probably wondered, is this woman going to work out? But then I shook it off and the next person I was able to kind of get through a call.
It was all uphill from there, that was the low point. And then
that was the low point. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, that's a good question to ask our whole team. I know they have a ton of good stories about funny calls that they've had. And, but yeah, so that's my one for you today.
Awesome. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for time.
You're welcome. This was fun.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions today.
No problem.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, like to share before we wrap up?
No, I think these were great questions. I'm happy to do this again if folks have, additional things they want to ask. I love getting some from the SDRs too. So happy to do this again if we need to.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm glad you said that because I was about to say thank you to everyone who submitted questions, who's watching this video. If you're watching it right now and a question comes up, you have something you want to ask Lindsay, we're hoping to make this a series. So if you're watching this on the landing page, go ahead and find the form on the bottom, fill it out. If not, there should be a link somewhere above or below this video. Click that, follow that, submit a question. Once we have enough questions again, we can just do this again, have a nice conversation, dive into Lindsay's brain a little bit on sales development. So that's all I have. If you want to learn more about demandDrive, how we help build successful, sustainable sales development programs, feel free to reach out to myself or Lindsay on LinkedIn or head over to demandDrive.com if you're not there already. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, take care.
Bye.